how do we distinguish in leadership terms? Obviously, we have a serious problem as religious people. I had a big problem personally in 2016 because the representative of the party to which I am an adherent typically, and I've voted straight line Republican as long as I can remember, the leader of that party was somebody who, while he stood for some of my values and has turned out to stand for many more of my values than I thought he would in 2016, that on a personal level, he doesn't fulfill certain basic moral precepts about character, about the necessity of cleanliness in business dealings, about the decency with regard to women, for example. As religious people, how should we approach issues like that, about how to choose between candidates who may not be personally moral but may forward our priorities and disengage completely? What do you think the solution is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging reality. It's less challenging today than it used to be. Because, again, you have a party that advocates the killing of babies. I can't vote that. I don't care who the other guy is. You're looking in some ways at the lesser of two evils, but you always are in society anyway because nobody is perfect. So what I'm looking for in a leader, and it may come down to a simple analogy, if I'm going to have a brain surgeon, open my brain, I'm really not too concerned about his moral life. I would like to know that he's been in somebody else's brain and done the right thing whenever he's been there, and he knows his way around. There's a certain skill set for leadership. There's a certain ability that people need to effect change. And if you have a guy who manifests the ability to do that, the presidency is not a moral job. It's not a position of moral authority. It never has been. We don't want to make it into that now. You choose the best you've got, which would be someone who does justice, fears God. That is to say, there's a transcendental ought that binds his heart. An atheist doesn't have that. Even the founders of America, who were not Christians, they were deists, knew God had to be in there somewhere because there had to be some kind of existential power that had exerted a threat over people if they misbehaved. So you're looking for that in a president, and then you're looking for competence. And competence is really defined, in my judgment, at that level as leadership ability. So who has the leadership ability? Who can move things in the right direction? And who's closest to a biblical moral standard without expecting that he would be faithful to that fully? Who's closest to it?
So it sounds like you think that as a society, we've made a pretty grave mistake in trying to see the president as a moral figure anyway. Meaning there's been a lot of talk that the presidency is basically two jobs. One is implementing policy, making sure certain things happen, and the other is as sort of a moral leader of the country, creating a sense of social fabric in the country. And on one of those scores, the current president has been good on policy. He hasn't been very good at putting together social fabric from my point of view. No. But it sounds like what you're saying is that what we ought to be doing is stop looking to the presidency at all as the builder of the social fabric. In other words, it's our job in our communities to build the social fabric. Let the president do what the president needs to do policy-wise.
Yeah, and look, you can't blame him for the complete destruction of the family. Sure. He had nothing to do with that. That's why the fabric's coming apart. You know, when you think about how God looks at this or any society, the default position of humanity is brutally corrupt. I mean, you read the Bloodlands. So between Soviet Russia and Germany, between the late 1930s and 45, 13 million people are killed. None in a military uniform, none in a war. 13 million people were massacred by Russians and Germans in those brief years. That is a testimony to what will happen to people when evil is not restrained. Evil is restrained. God has designed evil to be restrained three ways. Number one is conscience. And everybody has a mechanism. It's a skylight that reacts, the Bible says, to accuse or excuse you. But conscience only works if you have a defined belief system. The guys that 9/11 guys blew up a building, that worked in their conscience because they had a faulty belief system. So you can tamper with conscience when you alter belief. When you tamper with truth or when you eliminate truth, the conscience is lost. The second mechanism God put in society to govern and constrain is parents. And the Old Testament is so clear. That's the one commandment with a promise. Children, obey your parents, for this is right, and it'll go well with you, and you'll be successful. And the way to destroy that mechanism is just to tear the family to shreds, redefine it, abuse men, turn men into some kind of joke, dispossess them of all moral authority. There's only one other mechanism God has put into place to restrain evil, and that is the government. The government is to, according to the New Testament, honor the good and punish the evildoer. And the Bible even says they don't bear a sword for nothing. They even have the power of capital punishment, which was instituted back in Genesis. So if you attack the conscience by destroying the belief system, if you attack the family by destroying the roles there, and then the next step you're going to face, you attack all authority. You just do anything you can to just strip authority of its power and its honor. You literally have decimated a culture. Then you take a guy and stick him in a presidential role. You think he's going to restore moral authority in a culture? That's an impossible task.
So when we talk about restoring moral authority in the culture, it seems like there are a couple of ways that have been pursued with regard particularly to young people. And one is a biblical path, and one is, for lack of a better term, the utilitarian Judeo-Christian path. The biblical path would be get people back in churches, tell them about the veracity of the Bible, in your view, the New Testament, in my view, the Old Testament, and then train them basically step by step. Believe in God, believe in the Bible, believe in biblical values, enact those values in your own life, build social fabric around that. The other way is, I think, tailored more to a secular audience, which is take the same messages of the Bible without actually mentioning biblical text and use those values and say that these values work. These are the values that have worked. These are the values that build civilization. These values are useful, and that's why you should bear them out. Do you think that one is preferable to the other? Are they both useful, these two paths? And which audiences should we tailor to? Because and the reason I ask is because what I've found is that as an Orthodox Jew, I never cite the Bible in any of my lectures. And the reason I do is because most of the people I'm talking to don't have that common frame of reference. And what I find is that I get a lot of emails from people then saying that they've started to re-engage with biblical thinking, not because I've cited the Bible, but simply because they've heard the values I'm talking about and now are interested in those values. But that's only one way of coming at it. Another way is to actually inculcate people in the reality of the religion itself. Which one do you think is preferable, and when are these useful?